Okay, in this tutorial we're going to have a look at making this fall in subscribe button announcer thing. So let's get to it. As usual, I'm going to be working in Fusion, so we need to find our Fusion comp. So come to the top of the screen, click Effects Library to make sure your Effects Library is turned on. Go to Effects, and the second one down is your Fusion composition. Now, by default, unless you've changed your settings, your Fusion comp will be 5 seconds long, which is what we want. What I'm also going to point out is my project settings, which are 24 frames a second and 1080p resolution. 24 frames a second is important because obviously that's going to dictate sort of timings and stuff. Okay, with that out of the way, jump into Fusion. So the first thing we're going to do is make our subscribe banner. So for that we're going to need a background node, which we can find on the toolbar here. And we're going to need a rectangle node. So with your rectangle node, take the output and pipe it into the mask of the background, and then we can drag the background into a viewer. Okay, so with our background, we're now going to change the colour. You can, if you want, just whop it up to red, it's up to you. What I've done, if you notice in my media pool, is I've got 3 screenshots that are basically screenshots from YouTube of various kinds, so we can get colours. So what we want is this red colour for our background. So if you select your background, if you press 2 on your keyboard, just stick it into this viewer. In your inspector, come to the eyedropper tool, click and hold it, and just bring it over the red of our subscribe screenshot. So now you've got YouTube's red. Next we're going to want some text, and we can bring in a text node, which is again up in your hotbar, and put what we want in our text. And now we're going to take the output of our text node and merge it onto our background node. This creates a merge for us, and if we now view that merge, this is what we've got. So we need to adjust the rectangle. So select your rectangle, and if you grab the edge of your rectangle, you can just bring it in and make it the size that you want it. So somewhere around there. What I did was I just came to the inspector and rounded the corners off. Now back to your text node. I'm going to change the font to Roboto, which apparently is YouTube's font, I don't know. We'll make it regular, and we'll just pull the tracking out slightly, like so. So you've got your button, part 1 done. Go and have a cup of tea. I'll just tidy this up a bit. Next, I'm going to bring in elements for the like button and the bell and a mouse pointer. These are all SVG files. I just find them easier to work with than PNGs. They give more flexibility. They basically come in as mini node trees, so there's no assets to worry about when you're giving your subscribe button to your mate or whatever. It's all self-contained. So to bring in an SVG, you come up to your menu bar to the Fusion menu, come to import an SVG, and then we look for our SVGs. So the first one I want is my thumbs up. So I'll click on that. I just kept everything at the default size, and this brings in this group here. Now if you double click, it opens it up and you can see all the nodes that are involved. What I did was right click, ungroup it. Now these two nodes here, the background node is transparent and the merge node you don't actually need, so you can delete them. If you now put this background into your viewer, you can see you've got your thumb. Now I don't like this clear middle, and by a process of clicking you can see which polygon is which, and it turns out polygon 3 is this middle bit, so all I did was delete that and you get a solid thumb. I don't think I actually mentioned uxwing.com is where I get these, or where I got these SVGs from. I'll leave a link in the description. Sorry about that, I should have said it earlier. So the next thing to look at is the background colour of our thumb. Again, if we come back to our screenshots that I took earlier, before it's pressed, our thumb is this shade of grey. So we can select our background. We can again grab the eyedropper and just pick up the shade of grey. We will change it to this shade of blue later on, but for now that's what we want. So the next thing we'll do is we'll merge the output of our thumb background onto our last merge node, and we can view that. Now the problem we've got here is clearly the thumb is way too big. So what we need to do, if we get a transform node, which is again in your hotbar, and just click it, make sure your background's selected, then you can click your transform and it'll automatically connect it. If for some reason it doesn't automatically connect it, grab your node, hit the shift key and drag it till the line changes colour, and then let go, and then that will connect it. So with your transform connected, you can come up to your inspector and simply drag the size down to what you want. You can then use the same transform node to position your thumb where you want it, like so. With the thumb in place, the next element we need is our bell. So again, same process, Fusion, import, SVG, and we want YouTube subscriber bell. Again, it tells you the resolution that it's going to come in at. Just click OK, and again you've got another group. Double click it, ungroup, and we can get rid of this background and merge because we don't need them. Again, select the background at the bottom and hit the transform node. Just brings in the transform node, and then you can merge this transform node onto your last merge. Now if we put this transform node into the viewer, lo and behold, our bell is too big. So again, hit your transform node and drop the size to what you want it. And then you can again reposition it like so. So we now have our basic subscribe notice. The last element I'm going to bring in is a pointer. Again, it's an SVG, so Fusion, import, SVG, and we want pointer, and click OK. Again, we've got a group, double click it, ungroup it, and get rid of your merge and background because you don't need them. Now we have a slight issue with this, because if we put the background into the viewer, the resolution is wrong. the 1920 is fine, but it's way taller than our frame. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in another background. Now this background is at our standard resolution, so if we merge that background onto the new background and make the new background transparent, and then we can use this merge to reduce the size so it's the size of our background, it fits nicely onto our background. Now what I also did was I created an instance of this polygon and background. So let's just move these out of the way. Why am I creating an instance? I hear you scream. Well, I'll tell you for why. Because if you look at my mouse pointer, it's two colours, it's black and white, and I wanted to sort of replicate that with this mouse pointer. So if we select the two, press Command and C. In fact, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is just select the polygon, press Command and C, and then click away and Shift Command and V, and you've got an exact replica of this polygon. So what we need to do is merge this polygon onto another background, but we need the background the same size as this. So we need these dimensions. The easiest way to do that is select this background, Command copy, Command paste. Now this background we can make white, like so, and we can pipe our mask into the background, so our instance of our pointer, and we now have a white pointer. If we now bring the output of our white pointer and merge it back onto the original background, we have a white pointer. But what we're going to do is if you come to your instance node, your instance polygon, and we're going to de-instance a couple of settings, which means that we can change them in the instance node without affecting the original. So select your instance polygon, come up to your inspector. The first one we're going to change is whether it's solid or not, so right click on the word solid and de-instance. We can now uncheck that, and our original polygon stays solid, but our instance polygon is now a border. But what we need is some width to that border, so right click on border width, de-instance, and now you can add some border width, like so. So this is now our completed pointer. But again, if we take our output from our merge node here and merge it onto our last merge node and view that, our pointer is way too big. So again, we're going to drop a transform node after this merge 4. In that transform node, we're going to drop the size to something that's meaningful. So maybe somewhere around there. So that's all your elements in place. So we can just move them over a bit, bring our media out. Okay, so now we start playing with animations. The first thing we're going to animate is our pointer. We're going to make it go basically to each element and pause for a fraction of a second. To do that, we're going to use our transform node, so transform 3, and we're going to animate the center X and Y. So I worked out that for the subscription sign to come up and fall over takes 2 seconds. So I'm going to come to frame 48, which for me is 2 seconds. And I'm going to move my arrow so that it's kind of down here somewhere. Doesn't matter exactly where, but just somewhere around here. I'm going to come to the inspector and I'm going to set keyframe on center so that the X and Y is keyframed. Now I'm going to use my arrow keys and come forward 12 frames. And I'm going to move my pointer over the like button. I'm going to come forward 2 frames. Set a keyframe and then come forward 12, and then we can reposition our arrow. Again, click away, 2 frames, set a keyframe, forward 12, and reposition. So basically you're pausing over each element just for a hair. Set a keyframe and then 12, and bring your pointer back down here somewhere. So what you get now is your pointer comes up to your various elements, pauses for a couple of frames, and then goes on to the next element. And that's basically our mouse animation done. So now we need to start thinking about animating our various elements to respond to the arrow coming over them. So the first element to be sorted is our like button. So if you remember, our first lot of nodes here is our like button. So we're going to use this transform 1 to animate our like button, and we're going to do that as our arrow so it pauses for 2 frames there. So at frame 60 on transform 1, with transform 1 selected, we're going to keyframe size. We're going to come forward 2 frames, keyframe size again so that it stays at the same size, and then we're going to come back to the middle and we're going to drop the size a bit like so. So what happens now is as the mouse comes over our button, it presses it. What we're also going to do is change the colour. To do that, we're going to come into the background node and we're going to set a keyframe on colour at frame 60, and we're going to come forward 1 frame, and now we're going to look for our screenshot here and we're going to pick up this blue. So again, eyedropper, click and drag and just drop it over the blue like so. Now what happens, or what should happen, is our mouse approaches, it clicks and the colour changes. And we're going to do the same for our subscribe and for our bell. So next we're going to do our subscribe. Now to do our subscribe button, which is here, we're going to need to add in a transform node and work on that. So if you select merge 1, which is the merge with your text, and come to a hotbar and hit transform. Now this is the animation for our subscribe button. this transform will transform both the box and the text, so it'll keep it all in proportion. So again, we need to come through our frames to find where the arrow stops, which is there. So we're on frame 74. So come into our new transform node at frame 74, keyframe size, forward 2 frames, keyframe size again, and then go back 1 frame and just drop the size a little bit. So again, we've now got our button being pressed, but we want a couple of other things to happen. So again, back at frame 74, the first thing we want to happen is for the colour to change. So again, we need to find the right one. So we've got our subscribed colour. So again, come back, you've got your text node, you've got your merge, you've got your background, and it's this background that is currently red that we need to change. So on frame 74, you're going to keyframe colour. You're going to come forward 1 frame so the button's pressed. Eyedropper, pick up your grey. Now we've got one more thing we need to change on our subscribe button. So again, come back to frame 74. This time we're going to go into the text node, and we're going to put a keyframe next to the text input box and next to the tracking. And then we're going to come forward to frame 75 and we're going to add a D. You're now subscribed, and we're also going to bring the tracking in slightly so that it fits back where it was. And now if we play through, hit the button and you're subscribed. Finally, we're going to sort the bell out. Now the bell is not there. Sorry. What I should have done as we were going along was renamed all these. I'm a bit rubbish at doing that because I know what nodes are what and you don't, and I'm really sorry. Maybe on the next tutorial we'll do naming stuff and keeping your workflow organized, unlike Simon's. Okay, this middle section is our bell. Now the animation for the bell, as well as the in and out sort of button push, we are going to, let me see if I can do this, where you've got the arcs either side of the bell, we want those off to start off with, and then we want them to come on when the animation has been completed. So we'll do the pushing in and out bit first. So this time we're working with transform 2, and again we're going to come forward till our arrow stops, which is there. So frame 88, we're going to come into the bell's transform. We're going to keyframe size, forward 2 frames, keyframe size, back 1 frame, and make it a little bit smaller, like so. So we've now got our bell being pressed. What we also want to do with our bell is change the colour. So again, on frame 88, we're going to come to the bell's background, which is this background 2, which is currently grey. Now in reality, when you click notifications it stays grey, but I think that's boring, so I'm going to turn it blue. So I'm going to keyframe colour at frame 88, come forward a frame, and then with the eyedropper I'm going to grab the likes blue again. So press the button, change the colour, and off you go. Now the other thing we need to do is animate the 2 arcs that I talked about earlier. So again, at frame 88, if you click on each polygon you can see the green outline around the relevant polygon, and by doing that I can work out that polygons 3 and 4 are the 2 polygons for those arcs. So at frame 88, with polygon 3 selected, I'm going to set a keyframe and I'm going to drop the level to 0. What that does is it makes it disappear. I'm going to come forward to frame 89 when the press happens, and I'm just going to bring the level back up to 1. And I'm going to do the same with polygon 4, so back to 88, keyframe and drop the level to 0, forward a frame and bring the level up. And that is all the animation for our subscribe button. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop back to the edit tab. I'm going to let this cache. We can play through it. So you get this at the end. Nothing moves for the first couple of seconds because that's the sort of bit where the button comes up and falls over. So let's tackle that bit next. So jump back into Fusion. We're going to start from frame 0. We don't need this second viewer anymore, so I'm going to go to one viewer so I can see what I'm doing. And we don't need our reference material anymore. Right, so we have our thumb, our bell, and our pointer, and at the end you've got your button itself. So what we're going to do now is we're going to animate the whole thing as one unit, and to do that all you need to do is come to the last merge node, so merge 6 in this case, come up to your hotbar and hit a transform. So with our transform selected, we're going to start getting into the animation. First thing I'm going to do is drop the size. So transform 5 selected, come into the size and just drop it down to maybe, I don't know, I suppose as big as you want it. Let's say 0.75, so 3/4 size should be enough. Next thing we want to do is reset the pivot. Now I don't know how clear this is going to be. If you look right in the middle here, we have a green cross, and that is your pivot point. So for things like rotation, at the minute, if we rotate, it's rotating around that central pivot point. That's not what we want to happen. What we want it to do is rotate around the cuff of our thumb. So to do that, you come up to your inspector, you see pivot, grab the X and just pull it over until it sits on the edge of your sleeve, like so. So now if we rotate, it rotates from that wrist, which is what we want. So if we now come back to full view, so we're going to start off with our animation coming up. It will hit a certain point, pause for a second and then fall over. So first thing first, let's get it orientated right. So we want this angle to be 90, and we can now use the center to put our button where we want it. And where we want it at frame 0 is off the edge of the screen. So we just drag it all the way down. Like so. So we're at frame 0, set a keyframe on center and set a keyframe on angle. Now we're going to come forward 12 frames, so half a second. And we're going to come to Y in the center, and we're going to click and we're going to drag it up. And it needs to be up high enough so that you've got space for the arrow animation when it's fallen over. So at frame 12, keyframe, center and angle again, we will pause for 6 frames. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Keyframe both again. And then 12, no, a whole second, 24 frames. We're now at frame 42. Our arrow animation starts half a second later, so we might tweak these timings a bit, but we'll see. So once you're at frame 42, we're going to drop this angle back like so. And now if we play through, you get your arrow comes in. Fabulous. So I've got this going on, up, falls over. And then we get our animation. Cool. Okay, next thing we're going to do is animate the bounce. And to do that, I'm going to come into the spline editor. Now the spline editor can be found at the top of our screen here. Just click on it and it opens up this window. What we're interested in at the minute is the transform 5, which is the transform used to animate the whole shebang. So if we bring that over, and we're interested in the angle for now. So if you click on angle, you get this line. This is the path for the angle. If you come up to the top of your window here, you've got a button that says zoom to fit, and we can do just that. We can zoom it to fit. Now what we want to do is animate the bounce. So what we're going to do is we are at the keyframe where we're flat on the floor and it stopped bouncing. So we're going to go back 2 frames. So again, with your keyboard, press it twice, come back 2 frames, and we're going to change this value to 5. And then we're going to come back 2 more frames and reset it to 0. Then we're going to come back 2 more, and this time we're going to change this value to 10. Back 2 more, back down to 0, and then 1, 2 more, and this time we're going to set this to 30. Back 2 more, and finally back to 0. And that should give us a reasonable sort of bounce. So it falls over and bounces like so. Now at the minute all that's very linear, and we'll change that. The first thing we're going to change is our bounce itself. So just drag and select your nodes and hit Shift S on your keyboard, and it just smooths out that bounce. Next we're going to change the falling motion, and to do that we want these 2 keyframes, and again Shift S. But what we're going to do this time is we're going to drag this. If you press and hold the Option key while you drag, whichever direction you go off in first, it will stay on that and it won't sort of go up and down. So we're going to drag that a goodly way out so that it starts with a nice slow fall and then sort of crashes down. So it slowly falls and then whoop, and you get your bounce. Okay, so that's animated and smoothed out the fall. Next thing we're going to animate is the center. So this, or not animate but smooth, so the up motion. So if you come back to here, now if we click on angle, if you've got square in this box here, you can't change this, so nothing you do is going to change it. We can then click on the center and we get this pink line, which is our center path. Again, click on the zoom to fit. All I'm going to do for this, select the two nodes and then Shift S just to smooth them out a bit. So it comes up, holds for a second, and then keels over. And that's our animation pretty much done. So we can close our spline editor. We can get our node tree back into view. The only other thing is this. At the minute our arrow is visible and it doesn't look right there. So what we're going to do is we're going to make your arrow invisible, and to do that, this is our arrow node tree and this is the arrows merge. We're going to click on that merge. We're going to come to the inspector and just drag the blend down to 0, and now our arrow has disappeared. So if we come back to frame 0, set a keyframe on that blend, come forward to frame 48, click the keyframe, forward one frame and bring the blend up, and now as we scrub forward our arrow is visible, but while we're in the early parts of the animation it's not. The last thing we need to do is get rid of it, is get rid of the subscription bar. So we'll come forward to the arrow disappears. So the arrow goes off there at frame 97. We'll come back to our master transform, transform 5, keyframe center, wait 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames, keyframe center again, come to the end and just drag the Y down. And again we can come into our spline editor, zoom to fit, and you've got these two keyframes which are your subscribe button disappearing. Select both of them, Shift S just to smooth it out. And that hopefully should be it. So close your spline editor and come back into the edit tab. Again we wait for it to cache and we can play it through. Now I went onto Epidemic Sounds and got a couple of sound effect files, hence the sort of if you look, this is a transparent movie file that I made. You've got the sound effects creep in. I don't think you'll be able to hear them, but we'll try. So yeah, just to beef it up a bit, you can add some sound effects. Okay, so this is my sort of working timeline, as it were. As I say, I got a couple of sound effects and just added them in and timed them so that they worked with the animation. So once you've got your logo set up, what I did was I went into the Deliver tab. I selected just the Fusion comp, the button, and I changed the format. I'm on Mac, so I use QuickTime. I changed it to ProRes. I think HNX HR you can do it with as well. Cineform you can do it with, but I used Apple ProRes and found a type that allowed exporting alpha. I then rendered it out, and that is what you see. Let me put this back so I don't forget. On the timeline here. So this is the rendered effect, but with a transparent background. But you've also got the sound effects included in that. So you can then save that somewhere convenient and just drag it in as you need it. So yeah, that's basically it. Sub button with a difference, I suppose. I don't think I've ever seen one come off and fall over. Who knows, maybe somebody's done one. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. And as it says, like, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers!